you check the children? You're a little mad sometimes.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes. That is what
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Bienvenidos, Straight fans. Welcome back to the Horror Show. I am Jaime in Fuego, and this is a special review that I have the pleasure to be conducting here at Phoenix Fan Fusion. We are doing the press thing here, interviewed some artists and just crazy, creepy creatives, which was a lot of fun. But there is a film that is hitting theaters the weekend that I am shooting this this review, and it's been getting some pretty heavy hate in my estimation. It is a film entitled The Ritual, and I have seen some of our friends and contemporaries, saying worst horror of 2025. No, I'm here to at least dispel that sort of just hateful hype that I think, people jump on these bandwagons a lot of the time. And, I'm not going to name any names, but I've seen it from some of our friends. And so just to give some proper clarification, The Ritual is not as awful as everybody is saying it is, at least in my estimation. Art is subjective, as I always like to contend. But, it does not deserve that dastardly distinction. It's not that great, though, unfortunately. It's got some serious star power behind it, though. So you have Dan Stevens starring in a film entitled The Ritual for the second time in his career, which is kind of funny because in 2017 he was in a far superior film for Netflix with the same title. But you also have Al Pacino in this, and two heavy hitters, man. And so that is something to at least hang your hat upon. Pacino was doing a pretty whack-ass accent in this, but it slowly grew on me, as the film went on. But I think one of the reasons why people are hating on this so much is because of the visual presentation that they decided to go with. It was a very deliberate decision because it is shot with this handheld, shaky cam throughout the entirety of the proceedings, and almost to the point of feeling like documentary style. And it is so herky-jerky that it was almost making me nauseous at certain points. But that doesn't mean that the performances from Stevens and from Pacino were particularly bad. That doesn't mean the subject matter is terrible either, because if we're going to, I wasn't super impressed with this. I just want to, clarify that it's not worthy of all the hate. I'm not urging everybody to go out to the theaters or anything of that nature for this one, because it is currently in theaters, as I said. But, I just to kind of give some clarification, it's not great, but it's not as awful. So story is that this is based on true events. Took place in 1928, if I recall correctly. There was a woman who had been going through a various number of afflictions, and so they decided to actually perform an exorcism on her. So these are based on real people that Stevens and Pacino were playing. We see photos of them at the very end. They are religious men who were profiled in various high-profile magazines, after all of this took place. And so, it is one of those situations where you're trying to figure out if this woman had some sort of other psychological, neurological, whatever it may have actually been, or if she actually was possessed by a demon. And so the film makes it pretty obvious what is actually transpiring, but there is some disagreement between the people of this parish where the exorcism is actually going down, where Pacino is essentially conducting it, and then Stevens is his right-hand man who is essentially, the head of this particular place and assisting him with it. As far as the story goes, I'm not sure how much embellishment or greasing of the gears took place. The Stevens character has recently lost his brother, and, just that tragedy is weighing very heavily on his character throughout this film. And so that's really about the long and the short of it. So you have Stevens and Pacino as this pairing who are trying to exorcise or at least deal with this woman. And performances, though, are good. I enjoyed her performance. She basically does ping pong back and forth between, the vulnerability and writing letters to her mother. Her mother has been dead for a number of years, but she likes to write these little things and put them on the grave of her mother. And then Pacino, as I also mentioned, he's a little herky-jerky with his accent, and it's a little silly, but I adjusted to it over time, and he's one of the greatest that's ever done it, obviously. And so just to see Pacino's interest in this project shows that it did have some clout, and he's good in it, as is, Stevens is the standout in my estimation, though, because, doing an American accent and everything, but also just all of the internal struggle that he is kind of wrestling with throughout this film. I found him compelling. If you didn't, that's obviously to each their own and all of that jazz. But I thought the acting was pretty solid across the board. But just ping-ponging back to the filmmaking, I can see why the visual presentation may be getting so much derision from a lot of people, because it is almost nausea-inducing just how just the camera wobbling and everything. I don't know if there's like a single stable shot throughout the entirety of this film. It is just, constant movement and everything. And it does give it like an interesting raw and realistic sort of feel, especially with, the fact that it's based on true events and actual stuff that has been, documented very heavily in, prestigious publications, in the late 20s when all of this transpired. But it was definitely a very deliberate decision, for better or for worse. And as far as like makeup and things of that nature, I appreciate the fact that this possessed woman, or presumably possessed woman, they didn't go almost full-on cartoonish like you get with, like, in this day and age, especially in a post-scary movie world. Reagan looks kind of silly at this particular point if you go back to the original Exorcist, whereas this one, it was more like just subtle transformation and alteration. And I mean, she's not going for like full-blown, like, your mother's cousin hell or any sort of craziness like that. It is very much a like herky-jerky sort of personality thing going down with her, but it is more subtle and like realistic, at least in my estimation. So I thought the makeup and that sort of practical effects work that we have in this film was pretty damn good. So music, score, there's obviously, being a period piece, there's no like real needle drops or anything of that nature to take into consideration. Score was fine, but not like really heavy-handed, because they were going for a much more raw, in-your-face sort of style. Based on some of the smack talking about this film, it obviously wasn't for everybody. So I'm not going to say rush out to the theaters, but I just wanted to at least give, my personal opinion about the fact that, maybe if you're, I'm not super into possession and religious horror as much as our co-host Marsha Parker, when she was a part of the channel, for instance. But, I don't think this deserves a lot of the hate that it's receiving. And so that is my thoughts on 2025's, not to be confused with Steven's previous film from 2017, 2025's The Ritual, that is currently in theaters with Pacino and Dan Stevens. So I extend a grande gracias, right, fans, and to the peeps who allowed us to cover this as press. We've got some great interviews with some local creatives, spectacular comic books and stuff like that. That'll be hitting the channel soon as well. So that's going to be the end of it for today, Fright fans. And until next time, remember, stay scared.